Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's Squawk Talk on Socialist Telly. If you're watching us live, thank you very much for that. If you're not, because it's Valentine's Day and you're off doing something romantic and watching this on catch-up, then thank you for that as well. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Demo from Socialist Telly, and especially by Stephen Brown, who is from the Musicians Union and is standing to be the General Secretary of that union, which has typically been right-wing controlled, and as evidenced by its recent part with its relatively new NEC seat in voting to still keep Jeremy Corbyn out of the Labour Party. So that's where it is now, and Stephen's going to tell us about why he's standing and what he wants to do with it and where he wants to take it if he gets elected. We'll also be joined, tech permitting, by Tosh MacDonald to talk about Aslef, the union which may be about to disaffiliate from the Labour Party, as the Bakers Union did not too long ago. But Tosh has been in and out of the prep for the chat a few times and struggling with his signal because he's out in the sticks somewhere. So if he gets back on, all well and good. If not, it might be a shorter program than usual. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stephen, tell us a little bit about your history with the Musicians Union and why you want to run it.
Okay, I'm in my 9th year of working for the MU as the regional organizer in the Midlands. I've been a gigging musician all my adult life, really. Started at school, learned a trumpet through Birmingham Music Services at that time, and I don't know whether you use the word graduated to guitar. That might upset a few people, but picked up the guitar kind of in my mid-teens, carried on playing in brass bands and just kind of run with the guitar, really. And it's taken me, to lots of places I wouldn't normally have got to. I've toured Europe, UK extensively, North America, and I've lived the typical life of a portfolio musician, as we in the trade like to call it, where you never earn quite enough from music all the time consistently, so you've always got to have something else in your tank, to pay the rent and pay the bills and stuff like that. And throughout that time, I've been a trade union activist, and I've been a trade union official as well. I cut my teeth in the 1980s as a branch secretary in what is now CWU, so kind of learned all the roots stuff about trade unionism. I come from a trade union family, socialist family as well, so that's always stood me in good stead. I worked on community projects actually, as well as being a gigging musician in the 1990s on EU anti-poverty projects. I was treasurer of National Association of Credit Union Workers for about 3 years in the 90s. And then I threw myself fully into kind of music for a few years, and that's when my own band, we're in our 3rd decade now, picked up and started doing the touring and producing the albums and all that kind of stuff. But again, I needed a little bit of a fallback, so I started working for Unison part-time as a development officer on their recruitment and retention strategies, in the area that I live at the moment, in Worcestershire. Was successful at that, built that up, and then saw the job at the MU, and as a musician I thought perfect fit. So I've been doing the job of MU regional organizer, responsible for our collective bargaining. We've got 7 collective bargaining agreements on my patch, which cover orchestral and theatres, representing members in individual issues like most trade unionists would. A lot of our members teach. About up to 80% of our members at some time in their portfolio career will teach. So obviously going to schools and music services and stuff and representing them. We get a lot of discrimination, sexual harassment cases, particularly in our industry. So I've had to deal with a fair few of them. Sometimes the names that are involved would surprise you, and I've kind of been instrumental really in driving forward change in my own region, both in terms of representation of members, trying to get us much more organised as a union, and taking forward, equality agendas and stuff like that. When I joined the MU, my own regional committee, I don't mean my own regional committee, but the regional committee, was very male dominated, and I've tried my best to change that and get much more of a male female balance on it, including members from different ethnic backgrounds as well. Been reasonably successful in that. So that's the kind of mantra that I want to bring forward to the MU as a whole. I mean, the MU's done a lot of work over the last 2 or 3 years in trying to change, particularly the equality, diversity and inclusion agenda, but it's been less successful in my view in its campaigning on the key issues that face members, be it Brexit, COVID, music education, particularly when you think that on my patch, over 40% of freelance musicians on my patch got no government help at all. I had phone calls from near suicidal members talking about their situation, no income, people at the top of their playing game really ending up driving delivery vans or working in care homes. And I'm not demeaning those jobs. They're important, valuable jobs. They kept us going through COVID. But these are people who've played with some of the biggest artists in the world, having to go and do that because they've got no government support. And when you hear the Tory government saying, "Oh, go and retrain and do something else," it can be quite cutting and emotionally and mentally health damaging to our members. So there's a number of issues that I think that the union needs to tackle. If you'd have asked me 5 months ago whether I was going to be standing for General Secretary of the MU, I'd have thought you were barking mad. If I'm honest, I kind of looked at what was going on. The current General Secretary's standing down at the end of his term this year. And I thought, you know what, with my trade union background and my passion for delivering change and being a musician, then it kind of makes sense. And my kind of agenda really is one for change. And I've nicked a German election, if I'm honest, slogan from the recent federal elections they had over there. And I've kind of adopted it for my own use. And I'm going out under what I call a Dare for Better program, challenging our members to think bigger and be more ambitious and bold in what they want, not just for themselves from the union, but for the union itself, really. And I guess my agenda is an organising agenda, and I know that can be a bit passé sometimes when people talk about that, but I think it would absolutely reap dividends in the MU because, we've got lots of committees, but I've kind of got fed up really getting people inspired and motivated to come on our committees, and then they disappear within a year or so, a couple of years, because they realise they can't actually change anything. And that's, is it depressing? Yes, in one sense, but I want to give the power back to the members. Basically, that's my agenda. Yes,
we've got a few comments coming in. I will just remind people that if you want to participate in the show through the comments, put questions in or have your feedback on the show, you can do that if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. Twitter currently doesn't accommodate that, so if you want to move over platforms and participate, then do, and we'll field as many comments as we can. And if you've got questions, we'll put those to Stephen as well. Stephen, I mean, the union is what, 30,000 members, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hovered around the 30,000 membership for 2 or 3 decades. It's gone up over the last 5 years by a couple of thousand. It dipped during COVID for obvious reasons. We lost a few members because they, basically they got no income, so couldn't pay. We had a hardship fund and subs holidays and stuff like that. But, they're joining, in my view, because of incentives, which are not a bad thing. But one of the complaints that we do get from a lot of members is the cost of the subs. And that's another thing I want to look at, really, because our subs are quite high. And I guess if you're a long-standing member paying 237 quid a year and you see somebody coming in on half that, in the first year, it's caused a few emails to me and a few phone calls from members asking why. I mean, obviously it's about trying to encourage people into membership, and that's fair enough. But I think, it makes sense really if we're going to get a new general secretary, and I hope it's me, that everything that the union does, its relationships and its subs and its organising structures and its internal structures, are looked at really, because I think this is a once in a generation opportunity, and it's probably the best opportunity in the last 20 years to address some of those issues. Our rule book, was put together 20 years ago, as was the current structures around that kind of period. We're now in 2022 and the world's a much different place, isn't it? A lot of our members, even during COVID, have got online and doing music lessons and stuff like that for their students online. And that's in line with what's happening in society generally, I guess, with people lucky enough to be able to work from home and stuff like that. So I think with all that change that's happening, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had what I believe are, a completely fragmented education system going on in this country for far too long, which has had, I would say, a more severe impact on music education. For instance, we've got structural inequality within the system where poorer kids from working class backgrounds are getting squeezed out of music education. It's not a priority for this government. Unfortunately, we had the situation a couple of weeks ago where, they were trying to get music teachers to teach other lessons for kids to catch up. So music was, proposed to be battered out the syllabus altogether. And it just shows a complete fundamental lack of understanding of the role of a music educator, particularly in modern education, to think that somebody could just pick up that and teach something else, when since 2008 and in particular 2010, austerity has cut deep and cut hard in our profession, particularly for music teachers. And they've lost, a lot of them have lost teacher status. They've been kicked out of the teachers' pension scheme. There's lots more unqualified teachers teaching. So as a practical solution to trying to address kids' education catching up, it was just nuts, really, and just demonstrated a complete lack of understanding. One of the things I'd like to do if I'm elected is look at the vision, really, for music education in this country, because it is the talent pipeline for the future. At the moment, before COVID, we had a £5.8 billion music industry that's kind of lost half of its value, really, during COVID because of people not being able to work and stuff. And if we're to ensure the future of our industry, then education has got to be at the core of it. And I want us to be more brave and bold and ambitious in terms of setting out what I think music education policy should be in this country. I mean, when I first started in this job, one of the first consultations I went to was over in Nottingham, where they had this absolutely brilliant outreach scheme where they got loads of kids who couldn't be bothered to go to school. They weren't interested in going to school. So they had all these evening and weekend projects where they had all kinds of different cultural workers, arts workers, music teachers, dance teachers, that kind of stuff, getting out to these kids and getting them back in mainstream education. Of course, that was one of the first things that was cut, along with other community and outreach and youth services, and it pays its toll. I was speaking to a grime artist from Nottingham a couple of weeks ago, and he was basically saying to me he didn't get his music education from school. He got it working with his peers in youth and community centres and learning his craft there. So education is multifaceted, really. It's not just about what goes on in school, it's what goes on outside of the school settings and also in the youth and community settings, which again have been devastated by this government. And I think it's important as a union whose core really business is music. Obviously, we do what it says on the tin, Musicians Union, that should be a major pillar of our approach as a union, really. And it's not just about setting out a vision for music education. I think it's about organising our music teacher members much better, because we haven't got that mapping data to even begin to start that, and there's been a reluctance within the union, the top of the union, to even collectivize those members and even think about campaigns like that. So that's something that's really important to me. I want to see all kids, irrespective of background, where they come from, what ethnicity, what demographic, whether they're working class, whatever, getting music education, an instrument of their choice every week. Because ultimately that's where I am today. I mean, some people might think, well, that's not a good thing. Look at him, but
governments love to boast about the kind of UK's contribution to world music and to film and all that kind of stuff, but they want to put sod all money into actually helping to maintain it. They just want to ride on the back of it at the time. this is not going to be decided by that many people, is it? Because you've got 30-odd thousand in the union. Your typical turnout, I gather, is about 12 or 15%. So you could be talking 4,500, 5,000 people in total who are going to decide this thing. So a couple of thousand getting behind you could be decisive, really, in terms of actually revolutionising what the musicians union does and stands for.
Yes, I think the margins potentially could be quite tight, and it's an alternative vote system as well. So members will get to decide their preferences 1, 2, 3, because there are 3 candidates. There's myself, there's a chap called Maurice Stemp, and the current Deputy General Secretary, Naomi Poll. You know, and every single candidate has got something else and something different to bring to the table from each other. But, you know, I'm definitely the candidate for change and for reform, and wanting to bang that drum, because I don't think that, you know, with the challenges that we face, particularly over the next 5 to 10 years as musicians, we can carry on doing things the way that we are, really. And we do need more engagement, and we need more involvement from more musicians to do that. I mean, it was telling, the way that the MU sets up its general secretary election is you have to get nominated by at least one region. So there are 6 regions within the union. It's kind of a bit of I think if you think of a lot of the unions where you have to be nominated by a branch, it's a bit of a quasi system like that. You know, you have to pass a threshold, and the threshold is getting nominated by a region. I came second in a couple of the regions, a bit distant, you know, but still came second, and I won the Midlands region nomination by 83% of the votes, which, you know, I was quite pleased about. And I think, you know, it shows hopefully the respect and value that my regional members in the Midlands have for the work that I've done, you know. And I was absolutely chuffed, and, you know, thanked everybody for putting their trust in me.
What proportion of the members have you got in the West Midlands, mate, across the union? Because presumably London is the big one, but then Birmingham will be quite close after that, and other Midland cities potentially.
Well, I mean, it's interesting actually that you asked that question, because one of the issues that, you know, I think that the union faces is the whole question of, I mean, you know, it's bandied about in these days, you know, in terms of levelling up, isn't it? You know, the government saying we're going to level up, but we know that their version of levelling up is not necessarily us on the left's version of levelling up. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the kind of most of the members in terms of a bulk, I think the biggest third are in and around London. I mean, my patch, the Midlands, which covers East and West, has 3,000 members. You know, there's more members in the North, but it's a bigger area. But I think it also reflects the investment that each region has had in terms of culture and music over the last 20 years or so. You know, Manchester's fared much better, for example, in terms of its cultural investment with Media City and all the rest of it. Cardiff to, you know, a degree as well. Whereas in poor old Birmingham, you know, we always get mocked as the second city, and people take the mickey out of us and all the rest of it. But we used to have 2 TV studios in the city, and they were shut, you know, in the last 20 years. And that has had a marked impact on the sustainability of careers of musicians. And one of the things that I'm campaigning on outside of this general secretary election, actually, along with Equity and BEC2, Equity being the actors union and BEC2 being the technicians union, is calling really for a film and TV studio to be set up in Birmingham, but certainly the Midlands, you know. And I've been writing some papers along with Equity and BEC2 on how we can best achieve that, you know, because there is capacity, I think, within the TV and film industry, particularly with the growing platforms like Netflix and Amazon and stuff like that. They're looking for places to make programming and films, and where better than Birmingham, because the skills are here. You know, we do have a skilled workforce to do that, but most of us are trucking elsewhere all over the country to find and do work. And you have to ask yourself, you know, given the fact that we're in the middle of a climate emergency, surely it's much better to get that work locally, well paid, than it is to truck all over the country, you know, and travel for 2 or 3 hours to do a job you could do in your own backyard. And I'm kind of the only candidate really that's talked about, you know, the environmental impact and climate change and sustainability for our members, for their careers, and championing more regional infrastructure and funding, really. Particularly if you've got working mothers, they can't take 2 or 3 hours out of their day to go and drive to a gig and then do a gig and then come back. It's the fees that the MU have negotiated with the engagers and employers that we haven't risen like everybody else's wages, in line with inflation, at least over the last 10, 12, 13, 14 years. We're still at a point where pay, like all other workers in the country, is behind 2008 levels. We've got the worst kind of cost of living crisis, really, that most of us can remember in living memory. I don't remember it being this bad in the 80s. The good thing about the 80s, in one sense, that trade unions had more members and were prepared to take more action. And it's great to see, Sharon Graham at Unite picking up that mantle and running with it. So I think there are lessons to be learned for us there in terms of, organising and acting in a more collective manner, because it can change things, in my view.
Yes, well, I mean, on the topic of pay, and Tosh is joining us. Hopefully, he's just trying audio now, and hopefully he won't get kicked off because he's struggling with his bandwidth, I think, in the out in the country. But on the topic of pay, I mean, you've got an industry that's struggling for work generally. You've got members when they're working who are not getting paid what they need, and yet the union has one of the highest paid general secretaries positions, as I understand it. So, I mean, you've got a particular approach on that reminds me of what Paul Holmes did with Unison, and came very close to winning their general secretary position by saying he was going to work in the job on the average wage for his members, and that obviously resonated with people in Unison. So, tell us what your approach is on that, and what you want to do about the whole pay structures, etc.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it's when I've been out going around the country talking to members, you find that opinions are kind of quite divided, not in a kind of conflictual way. Some say that, well, I don't care what the general secretary's paid, as long as the general secretary does a good job, and I'm not happy with the way things are at the moment, so I've got an issue with the pay of the general secretary. And then you've got others who say, I've got an issue with the pay of the general secretary because it's the highest paid general secretary, by comparator unions. What are you going to do about it? And I say to people, look, I'm not standing to be general secretary because I'm motivated by the money. I'm certainly not. I've had times in my career where I've been, earning very little money from music, and I've had to do 2 or 3 other jobs. I mean, at one point, in the late 90s, early 90s, I was working in a cycle shop doing repairs. I was going out in the morning to a sorting office. I've even read meters, driven delivery vans, and there was times when I was gigging 3 or 4 times a week, and I was getting home from a gig at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, putting my poster uniform on and going out and sorting post, and then like the day would start again, and I'd be doing a gig in the same evening. It would be like a treadmill like that. So as a musician, it's doing a good job and being the best I possibly can be for our members that motivates me. So my view on the pay of the general secretary is, do I think it's too much? Yes, I do think it's too much. I'm told that the executive committee of the union, whatever I think about it, will determine the pay and conditions of the general secretary. Well, that's fine, but what I've been saying to members is that if that's the case and they're paying me what I think is too much, I'm quite happy to set up a trust fund and have that difference paid into that trust fund, which can be used for the benefit of members. And it might be projects that they've got ideas on for the advancement of their own career, or it might be stuff that's useful for the union. One of the things I'm really keen on, generally, not just as part of that kind of pay project, really, is seeing more project driven stuff within the union to do what I call like for like recruitment. Our membership is basically made up of about 70% male, 30% female. So I don't think it represents our industry as effectively as it should do. And I think we can address that by using our best resource, really, our members, and getting them involved in projects and paying them if necessary for a project, to deliver a project, to go out and speak to speak to members in their own image, really. So if that's, you know, in the grime scene, or if it's in the orchestral scene, you know, because we have seen drops in membership in certain sectors, then I think we need to do that. We need to do more of that like for like recruitment, you know, and I don't think that's a revolutionary concept, but I think it's quite revolutionary in the MU, unfortunately. And you know, if we really want to see change within our union, we can't just talk about it and pass policies. We've actually got to get out there, put boots on the ground and do it. And I think we've got to inspire members. That's my view. You know, we've got to present a picture to them that is visionary. It gives them hope, and it gives them a reason to be in the MU and want to fight for the MU and fight in the MU. You know, for better pay terms and conditions, not just if you're an employed musician, you know, working in an orchestra or theatre or whatever it might be, but also, you know, I've spent most of my adult music career working in the alternative scene, you know, coming up in the 90s with the bands like The Levellers and Chumbawamba and Oyster Band and stuff like that, for those people who might know them. And if you go and speak to musicians on that alternative music scene, a lot of them are on the left. But the most of them won't be in the MU because it's not relevant for them. And I think as a union, we have to change that. You know, and what's been really good about going out and meeting members is just how many members recognise that we do have to change, and they want to see real change. You know, and COVID has had its impact on this campaign as well. Really, I mean, I've obviously done a fair few online things like this, doing stuff on Zoom. But there is absolutely no substitute for being in a room packed full of members and speaking to them and giving your pitch and, you know, doing the whole Q&A stuff, because, you know, presence is everything, isn't it? Really, I think when you stand in front of a bunch of members, and as a performer myself, being on stage, you know, I've done plenty of gigs that have I think Alex Ferguson used to say, give you a squeaky bum, you know, when you turn up and you're playing to 10,000 people you don't know. From Adam, you know, I've spent a lot of time touring over in Germany, and the great thing about the German music scene is you can get on those big festivals even as a relatively unknown band, because it's about the value of the music, not how you look or what connections you've got and all that kind of stuff. You know, and playing those gigs when you're on the same stage as, I don't know, bands like The Darkness, for example. We supported The Darkness, or some of the big German bands like Die Arzer or Die Totenhosen and stuff like that, that some people on this call might be familiar with, or maybe not, but they're, you know, they're the equivalent big acts over there, and having the opportunity to play with them and to play to their crowds and do that can be quite a challenge. But I have to say, none of that compares to going out and doing this and speaking to members and trying to give them your pitch and hoping that you ain't going to get run out of town. You know, I was in Liverpool last week speaking to the Liverpool Phil, and they made me feel really, really welcome. There's just, you know, just something about Liverpool, isn't there, really?
Well, that's my city. I don't sound like it, but yes, I'm an adopted Scouser with 4 Scouse grandkids these days. So yeah, I do love the place. It's the question I was going to finish off with, but we've had John Pinkerton has come on and asked it now. So let's talk organisational stuff in terms of how the election is going to run. John's asking, is the General Secretary election held under first past the post? So tell us about that, and tell us a little bit about schedule as well. So when's the ballot open? When's the ballot close? What do people have to do to make sure they get their vote if they're members of the union, etc.?
Okay. The General Secretary election part, which is the postal ballot, that's going out now and will be live for 3 weeks. So it runs from today. Ballot papers are going out from today, and they have to be returned by the 7th of March. Is an alternative vote system. So you choose your candidates in order of preference. So it's got the potential to be quite interesting, really, I guess, you know, because there is an establishment candidate, as I would say, you know, who's been involved in all the decisions over the last few years. She's popular, I guess, amongst some members, popular in London. I imagine she won the nomination in London. So members get the choice, really, to put their vote in order of preference of their candidates, you know. And I would say that, you know, even if you think that one of the other candidates is your first choice, put me down as your second choice. But I hope that people choose me as the first choice, obviously, because if they do want real change.
But as a contrast on that, then I'm guessing that, you know, is it going to make a difference? Do you want, if people want to vote for you, should they just vote for you and not put a second choice down, or what's the, you know, is it going to make any difference to the outcome? I guess if you be, you know, if your second vote start counting, you're out the contest, so it's not really going to matter.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, obviously, the more first vote preferences I get, the better chance I've got of winning this, because in the first round, if a candidate gets more than 50%, they've won anyway, haven't they? You know, I'm not sure that will be the case this time, because what we have clearly got in the union at the moment in terms of the regional nomination meetings and who came through those nomination meetings is a north-south divide. That probably won't surprise most people, I guess, given the variance in infrastructure and cultural funding between the north and the south of England. But it's been noticeable, I think, in this election so far, just how much of a divide there is. You know, I'm kind of sitting in the middle, in the Midlands, in all of that. So I've just basically said to people, you know, my job, if I'm elected General Secretary, is unifying, really. Yes, I do come from a left platform. Yes, I do come from a platform of change. Yes, I want to see improvements in our campaign and the way we do things. But, you know, I hope I've got the experience, trade union experience, to demonstrate to anybody who's voting, whatever camp they're in, that if I'm successful and win this election, I can unify all of those camps, because I understand the issues for musicians and I understand trade unionism. And
it's probably worth underlining again that you've got experience which none of the other candidates have got in terms of breadth across the union movement as well, with CWU, Unison, and Unite, was it, as well as
I was a student,
as well
Unite,
as the musicians.
Yeah, I also sit on the TUC Regional Executive, and I chair the Creative and Leisure Industries Committee for my region. And over the last 12 months, I've negotiated groundbreaking agreements, which are first actually in our industry. One for the City of Culture in Coventry, because Coventry was the most recent City of Culture. So that set out, you know, certain terms and conditions to guarantee trade union rates for the engagement of all creative sector workers. And just last month, after 18 months of discussions with the Commonwealth Games lawyers, I secured a similar agreement for any creative workers employed by the Commonwealth Games. And as I say, those are absolute firsts in our industry. So I'm quite proud of my achievements in that, with the support of Equity and Bectu, you know. So I've got the...
if people want to check out your campaign and see about voting for you, is there a website that we can put up on the screen so they can see?
Yes, sure. So it's www.StephenBrown, that's with a PH, 4GS, it's the number 4.uk. So StephenBrown, 4GS.uk.
Right, that should be going across the screen now. Just tell me if that's correct.
Yeah, that looks cool.
Excellent. Now, the last question I wanted to finish on the topic really was, again, coming back to, and excuse me for doing this, but I think it's a relevant comparison where we've seen in Unison, the biggest union in the UK, at the other end of the scale, really, from the musicians, but very similar in terms of the fact that it's been right dominated. But now the national executive in Unison and the presidency were both won by the left. And they've had an absolute all-out battle on their hands to try to get anything done, because the right-wing machine within the union has done what it can to impede that process, let's say. Is that going to happen in the musicians? And if, you know, do you have a plan for how to, I mean, don't tell us too much, don't give everything away, but, you know, how are you going to get the union actually doing something with your mandate, if you like?
Well, I guess on one level, you hope that if I'm elected General Secretary, the mechanisms within the union, the various committees and the executive committee that we have, respect that mandate. That's the first thing. The other thing really is I've been promising, as part of this campaign, what I call a big conversation as part of my Dare for Better programme. So part of that will be about involving members and demonstrating the value of their input, starting those big conversations, getting groups of members together, whether it's in our orchestral section recording sections, whether it's our equalities committees, and trying to explain to members and getting experts in, because I really do like, obviously, the impact that Sharon Graham's had in Unite in terms of getting these forensic accountants and doing research and stuff like that, and showing the value of campaigning and organising. And I think when I have those conversations with members on my own patch, they do recognise the value of that, and I think they want to see more of that. So it's going to be a job of persuasion. I'm not pretending that it's going to be easy, Steve, because obviously the MU has done things a certain way for quite a length of time. But I think if we're going to face the challenges that we are going to face over the next few years, then change is going to have to happen, and if change is obstructed, I think that will be quite detrimental for the future prospects of the union. And in my heart, I don't think anybody wants that, really, and I think it's my job as General Secretary, if I'm elected, to inspire and give people a vision. You've got to get people on board. You can't talk at people. You've got to talk with people and listen and have conversations and sell the vision, really. I mean, that was what's so amazing about Corbyn, wasn't it? When he got elected leader of the Labour Party, he inspired so many people to get involved. In my own CLP, we had loads of young people getting involved, particularly in the 2017 election, absolutely passionate about stuff. And I think if people see that, and I'm going to use a word here I probably shouldn't use, but the momentum carried along and the vision and the hope, and I want to give people vision and hope, and I think that's also the job of a leader. Yes, you're going to face challenges, and how you deal with those challenges is obviously important, but I think I've got the relative experience and the determination and presence to do that, really.
Yeah, I think you've actually gone over quite a number of examples of how much experience you've actually got from a number of different trade union backgrounds and all a number of different things that you've done. And the one thing that struck me off the bat, you said quite early on this evening, is 5 months ago you didn't see yourself being in this position. And I always think that the best candidates for any leadership role are the people who never envisaged actually having that role at some point in their lives. So the fact that you've got to go for it and you think you can make the change, and you're not doing it for the money, you're doing it because you believe you want to make a change, is absolutely the best reason to do it. And I did just want to add, actually, the power of music is a fantastic thing. You mentioned the Levelers a minute ago. I was a teenager in the 90s. They were one of my favorite bands. They still are, actually. And they're definitely part of my political education. So their music has definitely influenced where I've gone with my political education, and with Corbyn as well on top of that. So I'm just curious as to what you think of in terms of musicians. You've mentioned teachers and people of that ilk, and people who are having to take other jobs and perhaps struggling a little bit. And when people think of musicians, they do tend to think of the big, players on TV or what have you. What is the breadth of your membership? What backgrounds do many of them actually have, and how do they relate to perhaps other people who may not particularly identify with music?
Oh, that's a huge question, that is, Damien.
Saving it up for last.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, what was great about music education, really, and I guess it does come down to this in a lot of ways, is, when I was growing up as a kid and having music lessons in the 70s, early 80s, there were free music lessons, and it was free in so many other ways, because it gave opportunities for working class kids to get into those seats in orchestras, and you'll see plenty of, and I'm just giving you an example here, I'm not trying to narrow the bandwidth or anything. You'll see plenty of musicians sitting in orchestras who got their music education in secondary schools or comprehensive schools, sitting in some of the biggest orchestras in the country as working class backgrounds, who would never have had that opportunity. That is starting to slip away because of the music education system that we've had. So, in terms of the higher echelons of music, I guess in those circles, and in, I suppose to a certain degree, the session world and stuff like that, it is getting narrower. but I want to see that expanded, and that's why I've kind of laboured on really in the sense of music education. But you know, in one sense, you've got those alternative festivals I talked about. You've got musicians there, and there are some MU members, and a lot of those I think are on my side because, you know, they see the value of the equality and diversity within our industry. And then right at the other end of the scale, you know, you've got musicians from wealthier backgrounds, but one thing we have got in common is a love of music. You know, and when you think you go and see a band or you go and see a symphony orchestra or whatever it might be, you don't sit there and think they come from that class background, they come from that class background. You know, you listen to the music, don't you? And it takes you. And you talked about, you know, the levelers and people who are into the levelers. I'm sure they didn't sit there thinking, oh, you know, there's some middle class lads there playing some music. They introduce people to the politics of the time, and that's a great thing, and that's the way it should be. Really, it should be about the music. But you know, for me as an alternative musician, I suppose on the alternative scene, my music always came with a message. You know, that's who I am. You know, my music comes with a message, my politics comes with a message, and being general secretary will come with a message. You know, and I think if we're going to truly represent all musicians from all backgrounds, all demographics, that's the attitude we have to take. We have to work together irrespective of background to make and get the things that we want and we think we deserve. You know, on my patch, the average wage is it's less than 20 grand a year, you know, and up until Brexit, for example, a good chunk, probably half of those members would have earned half of their income from touring in the EU. That's been removed. You know, so what are they going to do? Well, they've been doing the stuff I've been talking about. You know, they've gone and got delivery driver jobs or working in care homes or what have you. And these are really serious questions we've got to address, you know, and the government, and we're going to have to really press government really hard, if they're serious about levelling up, we know they're not serious about levelling up, but we've got to make the case for better cultural investment. You know, and it was part of the post-war settlements. You know, even Winston Churchill at the end of the during the Second World War realised the value, you know, to the nation's mental health of cultural spending. You know, and the current crop of Tories we've got don't really give a, you know, flying pig about that, do they? And I think we've got to convince society, excuse me, in the first instance, the value of that, and get them to put the pressure on politicians and use, you know, our best asset, really, our members, to make that case as well. So I don't really want to split things into, you know, who comes from where and what class and what background. I think, you know, we've got a common objective, in my view. You know, and that's the kind of approach I'm taking, really. I don't know whether that answers your question, though. Really,
it's a great leveler.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, we've seen Tosh McDonald has been trying valiantly to get in to the session and keeps getting defeated by his bandwidth. So we're going to stay with us, Stephen, if you can. You might have some questions for him, you never know. But we're going to try something we've never done on Socialist Telly before, which is I'm going to ring him and put him on speaker, and we'll see if we can manage to communicate. And Demo, I'm going to let you run this bit if you want to, talking about Aslef and potential disaffiliation, because you've been relatively quiet by your standards so far. So let's see if this works. And we'll see if two lots of tech all come together.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Tosh. You are live on Socialist Telly, and hopefully everybody can hear you coming through my microphone. I'll put it up there just in case.
That's good. I've been trying to log on, and not having much luck out here in the caravan in the sticks.
Yeah, don't worry about it. So Damo's got some questions for you, hopefully, about the situation at Aslef, and we'll tell everybody. I mean, if we had anybody from Aslef on here who's currently working in the union, then they probably wouldn't be able to say anything. But you are retired from the presidency of the union now, so hopefully you can give us a bit of a rundown on what you think is happening and what's going to happen.
Yeah. You want to start now?
Give us a quick rundown if you want. Then Demo can come in with any questions for more information.
Yeah, basically, what I've got to make clear from the start, I'm coming up to 4 years retired, so I'm speaking in a personal capacity. But when I found out that there'd been some items put up to Aslef's conference, or as we call it in Aslef, the annual Assembly of Delegates, which is taking place in May, about disaffiliating from the Labour Party. I was I'm personally quite pleased about it, the way the Labour Party's been treating working people and trade unions. Then on Saturday, I think it was, I pointed out to me an article in the Daily Mirror where they were running this. They named me in it. I know nothing about, it was coming up in there. I spoke to the General Secretary, and he says it's old news. The movement's known about it for ages, and it's just a slow news day, so the Mirror's putting it in there. Now, what's really got me today, since I spoke to you earlier, is I saw the thing, the Labour, I forget what it's called, Sienna Rogers puts Labour list out. Is it something like that?
Yes.
And so it's saying in there that, and things with the unions aren't too clever. Another small left-wing union, like the Bakers, are trying to get, Aslef, it might be a small union, but it's a strong and it's a powerful union. And to belittle us like that, I think is not going to do the Labour Party any good. We have 96%, or we certainly did at the time I finished, we had 96% member density. That's 96% of all train drivers in Britain are members of Aslef. So that says we have got some strength there. And though we might be small in numbers, 20,000 or so, we have certainly got a lot of density there. And we have a lot of political clout and influence.
They can't afford to talk up the relevance of the union quitting, can they? Because we've already seen the Bakers go. So they're trying to minimise it and push this idea that it doesn't really matter. Just as Starmer said over the idea of union funding, that he wasn't going to let that be of particular relevance to him. Damon, what do you want to come in with, mate?
Yeah, you can still hear the disgust in Tosh's voice there, to be quite honest about that headline. I saw the tweet that Tosh put out earlier on, which was much of the same mood. That the let's call them the lamestream media, because that's what they are. They've referred to Aslef as a small left-wing union, implying that should Aslef disaffiliate, it doesn't really matter. But you'd be the second union to do so under Starmer, should the vote go that way. So to me, it kind of
I'm sorry, Damo, I'm having trouble hearing you, mate.
I probably need to put the phone a bit of a different angle. Hang on, try that. So yeah, Demo was just saying that he'd read your tweet about it, which was of a very similar tone, and but they're trying to make out as though this isn't really that relevant. But it'll be the second union within the space of less than a year, really, to disaffiliate if it happens. And I'll drop in as well that the Bakers Union, I think, was 1896 or something, that it was part of the Labour movement, and Aslef has been very nearly as long part of 1904 and 1906 something, wasn't it? So these are massive historical factors, really, if it does happen. So what's the process within the union then, mate? And what's the what do you think of the odds that it's going to go that way?
Well, it's hard to say what the odds are. What I will say, the process is, unless it's changed in the 4 years since I've been gone, was that every second conference, every other year, is a rules conference. Now, as it stands, Labour, Aslef has to be affiliated to Labour Party. By rule, we have to be affiliated. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if it's a Labour Party that we're supporting more, then more donations and more support is given. We were very strong in our support during Jeremy Corbyn's time. We did start to be selective about which single MPs we gave support to. Some of them were just not anything to do with Aslef's policy or beliefs or were any good to us. We wanted rail nationalisation. We only support MPs that would give us rail nationalisation, and all the other utilities being nationalised. I think what's getting me with this, I get the feeling that they're almost trying to push trade unions away. If you look at what they did with the Bakers Union, you look at the way the GMB even, which I think at the minute is a fairly right-wing union, in London area, they've reduced the funding to the Labour Party. I think when you look at Unite, I think Sharon Graham's doing a fantastic job in Unite, and they've been reducing funding. The relationship between the Labour Party and the trade unions is becoming an abusive relationship. My opinion is, when you're in an abusive relationship, it can't be mended. You have to get out of there. And I think that's my personal opinion. That's what we need to do. As for how the vote will go, we just don't know. What's important to remember, it's not general secretaries, presidents, executive committee members or full-time officers. who will make this decision. It's lay members who, for that week or week and a bit, are the Parliament of Aslef, and they make all the decisions. And all the officers have to carry out those duties. They have to carry out the policy that's made by conference. That's how the democracy of a trade, certainly our trade union works. It's a shame the Labour Party doesn't want to do the same and wants to ignore conference decisions.
Yeah, there's too much of an attitude of know your place with this this Labour leadership at the moment. That was very much the response to I think it was Unite who was saying they were going to withdraw even more funding. But yeah, you know, we're under new management now. Well, hang on a minute. Remind me that the trade unions came before the Labour Party, which they formed. It wasn't the other way around. So, you know, surely Labour are just asking for more funding to be withdrawn. They genuinely want it to go, it seems. Do they just want to become another Tory party of donors?
Well, I think they are another Tory party. I think that the trade unions, in more cases than not, are an embarrassment to them because they don't want to. You look at what's happening with the bin workers in Coventry and the Labour Council. They're on strike there. They're bringing in scab Labour. You know, this is a Labour Council, and they're being supported by national Labour Party at national level. I spent 3 years as a Labour councillor in Doncaster, and I've got to be honest, being in the Labour group wasn't like being in what I would class as a Labour group. You know, and you were tied as a councillor, you were tied to them decisions. As a trade unionist, I've always believed in collective responsibility. And last March, or March before now, when both myself and my wife were Labour councillors and both left the party because we couldn't represent this body that's there now, Starmer and his leadership. We can't represent a party to people who are just lying all the time and breaking promises. You know, you want people you can trust, and as a, you know, also what they're doing with protecting the apartheid in Israel, in Palestine and Israel. There's a line that trade unionists have to draw. I was very involved in anti-apartheid movement, you know, back in the 80s. And yes, we did have people at that time saying we shouldn't get involved in things beyond our shores. You're supporting terrorists. Now, we were proved to be right. History proved us right by supporting the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. We'll be proved right supporting the Palestinian cause against the apartheid that they're seeing there from Israel. We will do things, we'll get it there and we'll get it right. And no matter, you know, what hurts me is I'm from Doncaster, and every time I go to the train station at Doncaster, I pass a brass plaque on the wall about the two railway workers, James Holmes and Thomas Steele, who actually took the first from their branch, took the motion down to the TUC. I think that was in Plymouth or somewhere on the southwest coast, to actually form a party for trade unions to represent the interests of trade unions and working people in Parliament. And the Labour Party we have now seems to bear no resemblance to that whatsoever. To be quite honest, it didn't under Blair or Brown. I do think it moved a little bit the right way with Ed Miliband. And I think without Miliband winning that election against David Miliband, then I think we wouldn't have had the Corbyn election that we had. And it was all a boost for so many years, for 6 years or so, we had such a boost. And I love Jeremy. I love him to bits. But, you know, we have to stand up. We can't keep kowtowing to the Tories in blue suits, pointy shoes, and air product who call themselves the Labour leadership right now. They haven't got a Labour bone in their bodies.
That's sadly all too true. Tosh, just quickly tell us what's the schedule for this? When's the conference going to meet and make this decision?
The conference meets in May. They will make the decision. Whatever rule changes or policy decisions are made by conference, then the executive committee have to carry that out.
Right. Well, that's going to be the big day then. So, Tosh, I do appreciate you struggling through with this, given the challenges you've had getting in there from the caravan. So, I really appreciate your time. I'll let you get going and get on with the rest of your holes. But thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it.
Well, you know, one of the differences, if I was a Labour member at PLP right now in a blue suit, pointy shoes, I wouldn't be in a caravan, would I? I'd be in a posh hotel somewhere with proper Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I think I'd choose the caravan certainly than being in a suit. But there you go. All right, mate. Thank you for that. I think we'll wind it up on that point.
Cheers,
I
Carl.
will just.
Cool. And please pass my apologies on to Stephen for not being able to listen. I was really wanting to listen to what he was saying, and I wish him the best in his.
Well, what I'm
General Secretary.
What I'm going to do, because obviously there may be people watching this who've got hearing issues as well and might have struggled to keep up with that conversation. But I'm going to, as soon as I get this subtitled, I'll put it out on the Squawk Box site tomorrow with subtitles on it. I think the Facebook will probably add subtitles and possibly YouTube as well in the meantime anyway. But so you'll be able to catch it up on there if you've had trouble following that. But I will get it out on the Squawk Box as well so people can refer back and hear on both issues what's been said tonight, because I think it'll be very, very relevant for them. So thanks a lot for that, fellas. And I think on that point, we'll wind it up for the evening. It's been a very interesting show, and we'll finish 4 minutes early. Stephen, good luck in the election. You're welcome back on any time, and keep us up to date with what's going on in the campaign. And then we'll keep pushing people, because we only need, I think probably 3,000 votes would win it. So it's not like it's out of reach for people. If you're a member of the Musicians Union, watch out for your ballot. Make sure you get it in, and make sure your first choice is Stephen Brown for General Secretary. Thank you ever so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again next week. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.